Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. We are thrilled to host you for this important webinar on strategies for strengthening complete streets policies, brought to you by us at City Health and our partners at Smart Growth America. My name is Katrina Forrest, and I'm the Executive Director of City Health. And before we get started, just a few quick housekeeping notes. We are going to cover a lot of ground today, and we certainly welcome all of your questions. If you want to ask a question, please use the Q&A button below, and we'll try to get to as many of your questions as we possibly can. Now, before we dive in, we did want to learn a little bit about who is joining us today. So please, at this time, take out your phones and scan the QR code that you see on the screen to join our polling software. You can also go to the website on the screen as well to join the poll. Our very first question is, what city are you joining us from? And as you type in your answer, I will share I am currently in Richmond, Virginia, which is not a City Health city, but ordinarily I am based in Washington, D.C. And we will share more about City Health's medals later, but D.C. has earned a silver medal in Complete Streets. So we have a great policy on the books, but obviously some room for improvement as they go for gold. And I see we have folks from San Antonio, we have folks from St. Louis, from DC, from Austin, Cleveland Heights, Billings, Montana, San Diego. We have wide representation on this call today, which is incredibly exciting. Awesome. Okay, so our next question for you all is, does your city have a complete streets policy? It is perfectly okay if you don't have a policy on the books or if you don't know. That is the very purpose for today's conversation. We are going to give you all the tools that you need to work with your policymakers to put a strong policy in place. And it looks like so far, the vast majority of folks on today's call do have a policy in place. There are a couple folks that are not sure, and then about 15% where there is no policy. So this is great. Thank you all so much for the indulgence. We really do appreciate you for participating in the poll. Now, before we get into an incredibly robust conversation, I would like to share just a little bit about who we are at City Health and what we do. So we are a health policy initiative, and we are proud to partner with and be funded by Kaiser Permanente and the de Beaumont Foundation. Now, we provide a package of 12 evidence-informed policies that help cities provide healthy choices so that all of their residents can live their best possible lives. Now, as you see on this next slide, our footprint is vast. We partner with and assess the largest 75 cities in the US. But fear not, if you are joining us today and you are not among the largest 75 cities, that is okay. All of our resources, our toolkits, our reports, and so much more are available free of charge on our website, cityhealth.org. Now, we promote a package of 12 policies. All of our policies are pragmatic, they address the social determinants of health, and they can help to promote health equity. Additionally, all of our policies are upstream, they are prevention-oriented, and they address everything from safe and stable housing to clean indoor air. And of course, as you can see here, and the reason that we are on the call today, Complete Streets is one of our 12 policies. Now, the policy's goal is to provide access to safe streets for everyone. There are many people utilizing our roadways and doing so via different modes. We want to ensure that they can traverse their communities safely, accessibly, and harmoniously. There is a lot of momentum for this policy. It is one of the policies in our package that had the highest increase in uptake compared to last year, which is exciting, and it also means that there is a lot of opportunity for movement in this policy domain. Now, every year, we assess cities on our policy package, and we award them gold, silver, or bronze medals based on the number of policies that they have adopted, as well as the quality and strength of those policies. Our assessment partners at Temple University use a method called legal epidemiology to analyze city, county, and state legal codes. They then compare the relevant laws and specifically the text of the laws to our set of criteria, which is ultimately how we determine which cities earn a medal. And as you can see here on the slide, for complete streets, we have 13 individual policy criteria that we assess. And this is to ensure that cities have a policy on the books, that the policy prioritizes vulnerable users, however that term is defined by each jurisdiction, and ensures that there's compliance with the policy, among other things. You can again see our full 13 set of criteria on this slide. You can also learn more about how cities have performed on this policy and do a deep dive into the criteria at our website at cityhealth.org. Now, in our last assessment, which was released in December of last year, 30 of our 75 cities earned medals for complete streets, and that included 7 gold medal cities, 20 silver medal cities, and 3 bronze medal cities. Now, as you can imagine, with 75 cities and 12 policies, it's a lot of work, and we certainly cannot do this work alone. We are fortunate to work with so many amazing partners for each of our policy solutions, and all of our partners listed here on this slide provide subject matter expertise. They provide technical assistance, everything from policy development through implementation support, and they provide educational resources. Today, we are joined by one of our all-star partners, Smart Growth America. In my mind, they are the preeminent national organization working on complete streets. So we are incredibly excited to have them join the conversation today. And so without further ado, I would like to introduce Dustin Robertson. Dustin serves as the Thriving Community Senior Program Manager at Smart Growth America. So Dustin, feel free to take it away.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. And thank you, Katrina, for that introduction. We can go to the next slide. So let's do some level setting, complete streets. Now, the fact that you joined this webinar and the fact that most of you said that you already have a complete streets policy tells me that we don't need to give the entire history of complete streets or, go into great detail. But briefly, complete streets are for everybody. Traditionally in this country, over the past half century, we've really designed streets around cars and cars only, moving cars as quickly as possible from point A to point B. And we've realized that that is not the most efficient, effective, safe, healthy strategy for doing that. So Smart Growth America advocates for what we call complete streets. This visual here just gives one depiction of what a complete streets approach means. It basically means accommodating all road users and all uses, not just cars when we think about how to design streets. So that includes people of all ages, abilities, all different transportation modes. So it's not just cars. We're also talking about people walking, people using mobility devices, people riding bicycles, scooters, all the different ways that people need use to get around. We should design our streets with those purposes and those people in mind. Go to the next slide. So why should we care about this? Well, I mentioned a couple of reasons. Here's a really stark one that should get everybody's attention and has really alarmed us in recent years, and that is the increasing number and rate of pedestrian fatalities over the last decade. So this simple chart right here shows you the number of pedestrian deaths every single year, and you see a steady increase since 2010. We've gone up 75%. So while we've maybe made advances in other areas of transportation, this is one that is really going against what we would expect or hope. You can even see that during the pandemic, when people were driving less, people were working from home, staying home, those numbers continued to increase. So this is a very important reason that we should care about, road safety. Go to the next slide. But it's not just about road safety. Here's a simple infographic that shows some of the numerous benefits of complete streets that we tend to talk about. There are environmental benefits of complete streets. Other modes of transportation, such as walking and bicycling, are inherently more environmentally friendly than driving alone. Safety, just covered. Health. So this is a really important one, and this is why City Health works with us so much, because they realize that if people can walk, bike, roll to their destinations, they're going to get more physical activity. They're going to have more opportunities for exercise, but just in their daily lives, they're going to be able to walk to the grocery store, to walk to work, take a bike to work, walk or roll to school, things like that. And that's going to have numerous health benefits across a wide range of issues. Community. So when people can be out, moving around freely, comfortably, they're more likely to associate with each other. There's research that shows that people who live in walkable, bikeable communities are more likely to have more social interactions. You're going to develop friendships, connections with your neighbors, things like that. So there are numerous community benefits of complete streets. And then finally, economics. And this is one where we often have to push back, because people say, "Oh, well, that's going to cost so much, complete streets. It's going to be so expensive to build," or, "Oh, you're going to harm businesses because if people don't have places to park their cars or lanes to drive in, they're not going to be able to, survive as a business." But we point to the numerous research that has been conducted by us and lots of other, university researchers who show that no, actually, complete streets are an economic boom. People like to walk and roll to destinations, and when people who walk and roll spend more money than people who drive alone. And economic benefits, time and time again, are shown from complete streets. So these are 5 reasons to care about complete streets. But there are others as well. Can we go to the next slide, please? So right now, I would ask all of you, what are some of the reasons that you care about complete streets? You're joining a webinar on a Tuesday morning, midday. Why do you care about complete streets? All right, so far, health and safety is the front runner. Community surging. Okay. I think that's about it. Yeah, so health and safety are about 50% of the respondents. That's something that we care about quite a lot as well. But it looks like there are other people who are also interested in the community, environment, and even economic benefits of complete streets as well. There is no right answer here, by the way. Of course, it's all things. And this question, I'm sure that you all care about all of these things, but we wanted to hear what it is that drives you the most. So it looks like the responses are shifting a little bit, but we can say that health and safety is about the 50% majority. So awesome. Thank you all for that. Let's go to the next slide. So the concept of complete streets, we've gone over the benefits of. So let's talk about complete streets policies. What is a complete streets policy? A complete streets policy basically means you're putting on paper your city or your town or your county's commitment to complete streets. You're saying, this is what we believe in, this is why we want to do it. And then also the details of how you're going to do it, right? It's not enough to just say, we believe in complete streets. You really have to put pen to paper on the details of how this is going to roll out. So what you're seeing here is a map of complete streets adoption over time. So we started tracking this in around 2000, and you can see over time, policies have been adopted by over 1,000. It's approaching 2,000 now. Communities, states, counties, districts, different jurisdictions have adopted the complete streets approach, which is fantastic. We're really happy to see that. However, it's not just about quantity. We really got to talk about quality. And that's really the reason that we are having this webinar today. Because of the 1,800 policies that have been adopted, some of them are not of really great quality. And it's also important to consider, things change over time. What worked 10 years ago, 15 years ago, may not be as relevant today, or may not be as effective. So we at Smart Growth America say it's really important to pass a policy. Yes, that's a great first step, but it's not job done when you pass a policy. It's important to continually refine, improve, find ways to really make sure that the policy is doing what it set out to do. And if it's not, you can update it. You can pass a new policy. So that's why we're really having this webinar today. And you're going to hear from two cities that did just that. So you're going to hear from the city of St. Louis and the city of San Antonio, both of which previously had policies. Smart Growth America had reviewed their policies in the past, and frankly, they were good starts, but they were not as strong as they could be. And so we've worked with them, as you're going to hear, along with City Health, to improve and update their policies. So with that, I'm going to pass the mic to our first city. Can we go to the next slide, please? And I'll introduce you to Ann Schweitzer, our rock star in St. Louis, and she's going to tell you about St. Louis's journey in complete streets.
And thank you so much for that introduction, Dustin. I appreciate that. I definitely would not consider myself a rock star in this space. I first learned about complete streets in 2011 when I was working in Massachusetts as a community organizer. So it was neat to see that map of when the policies happened, because once I moved back to St. Louis, it wasn't something that I saw a lot of as time went on. In 2015, there was a complete streets policy enacted in my city, but I thought Dustin explained it really well. It was sort of the vibes of complete streets without any of the real details. So when I became an alderperson and had gotten my feet under me for my first 2 years, in my third year as an alderperson, I wanted to update the policy. Next slide. And this is some of the reasons why. You may have seen someone who has gone viral on TikTok and across social media for making fun of the potholes in the city of St. Louis. And that letter on the right there is something that I actually got sent to me from a constituent. And it's funny because they had put fix the expletive roads in the letter, and then underneath it, the different explanation was basically saying, don't just patch them, don't just do these kind of basic small fixes, but really address the entire network and do a better job of building out roads in the city in general. And that letter is still up on my desk, still up on my wall here at City Hall, and is something that I look at all the time. So this is really, one of the reasons that I wanted to work on it, more of the what the roads look like outside, but obviously there's a lot more to it. Next slide. So as I said, in 2015, there was a policy that existed in the city of St. Louis, and that had been in place until we passed this new policy in 2024. It had some information about the prioritization of all road users, making sure these policies are part of the general street design, but it was a 6-page policy, gave some definitions, established a steering committee, talked a little bit about training, but wasn't really a meaty policy about how to take what we wanted to see on our roads and put it more into the actual practice of building out the roads. So what we did is we took that policy and could not credit Smart Growth America, the American Cancer Society, TrailNet, other stakeholders here in St. Louis, City Health as well, for getting involved and helping to flesh out this policy, because they helped us work in different benchmarks we wanted to hit, talking about lane miles, how we'd actually show progress towards the goal, all of which is is in our new policy. We talked about a vulnerable populations index, which shows where we're trying to focus the funding, where we're trying to focus this, where the policy would do the most good for the people in the most need of this improvement. The Complete Streets Committee also got a lot bulkier. That is now meeting publicly. The committee and who's on that is a lot more spelled out. It includes members of the transportation community. Our bus network is not within the city of St. Louis. It's a separate entity. So those people who are working in that field, the State Department of Transportation, Great Rivers Greenway, which handles a lot of our federal money that comes in because of our unique government structure here in the St. Louis region. St. Louis City is its own county, and then we have St. Louis County, which is a larger group, but Great Rivers Greenway serves across both of those regions. So it's another partner we have when we think about some of the roads that go across the city and county. And then really importantly, it requires the use and focus on a high injury network to inform decisions. That's especially important as we are looking in our city of putting together our transportation and mobility plan, which will actually create what that is. So we focus all of our in this policy around how we fund our roads, focused on an actual document that shows where the streets are that need help, as opposed to our previous policy, which said kind of generally focus on this, taking that step forward to look at the actual streets and roads that need the attention. Next slide. But as I said, this isn't something that we did by ourselves. It was a really group effort. Some pictures are here. You can see Dustin in a few of these pictures of when he came to St. Louis and met with the different people within city government who work on our roads, who do the design, who do the maintenance, which interestingly enough in St. Louis is two different departments. So that was something we had to look at as well. And we did some walking and just tours around City Hall to look at some of the worst roads that we had. We've had some pedestrian fatalities just around City Hall. And this a very informative tour that Dustin led us on helped city staff to identify even more that they wanted to get done for those roads. And those roads are in the pipeline for funding now for improvements and have had some sidewalk improvements since. Next slide. So this one was really a piece that was important from our Complete Streets policy, is that we have an annual report in the policy, recommendations to our capital committee, which is really important because the Complete Streets Committee is now, when they meet, they're putting together both the reporting structure of the progress towards our goals, but also suggesting which streets need funding next. And when that goes to the capital committee, those projects are highlighted for the capital committee. So instead of the committee just saying, okay, let's do this street, this street, this street, as may have happened in the past, the people who are the experts in this field within city government are making those recommendations, and they're making them publicly, which is just incredibly important. The vulnerable population index in public meetings, again, so important for actually not just having a policy that shows goals and the general sense of what we want, but actual in census data, in road form, exactly where that should be fixed. And then the Complete Streets Advisory Committee is also reviewing all of these plans before they move forward, which a lot of our funding is really comes from a lot of different sources in St. Louis, as I'm sure it does in other places as well. But because of that, sometimes one road work project would look a lot different than another one, depending on who is leading it. So this makes sure that all of those projects are going through a centralized group that knows the policy, knows the priorities, and has a sense of what we're trying to do here. I think that might be my last slide. So I would like to hand it over now to Zan Marshall, the Senior Transportation Planner of the City of Antonio.
Hi, everyone. I'm Zan Marshall. I'm a senior planner in the transportation department in the city of San Antonio. I'm very excited to talk to you guys about our Complete Streets policy update. So next slide. I kind of want to start with an overview, and then we can kind of push in closer. So really, this started from an external push from a San Antonio Complete Streets coalition that was headed by Activate SA here in San Antonio and American Heart Association. So that external push has really got us to start thinking about needing a policy update. And then we went through a review process of the policy and what it is currently doing, and then what best practice and peer cities were doing. And then that led to drafting a policy, creating a stakeholder committee to review that policy, holding 3 public meetings during that draft review process, and then finally taking that policy to council for approval last September to get approved. And now we're doing implementation. So next slide, I'm going to kind of dig in now. So our first Complete Streets policy was adopted in 2011. It hit some of the core ideas of Complete Streets, right? All ages and abilities, all users, promoting safe pedestrian, bicycle, and automobile travel. This is all language used in the policy, is about 1 page, right? So it's pretty short. And we did see that we were developing some complete streets out on our roadways, right? Some of our street projects did include those aspects. Here are 3 examples. We have our 5-point, which has lighting, a transit stop, bicycle improvements, pedestrian improvements. We have in the bottom right, East Nueve, it's really narrow travel lanes. We have street trees, lighting, projected sidewalks, and really wide sidewalks, right? And then kind of a different version of that is on the left, with our shared use path on the right side of that roadway, and just a very wide sidewalk on the left. So we're seeing some of it come through in our projects, but not everywhere. So next slide. So after seeing what our policy was currently doing, we went and looked at peer cities and some best practice. So peer cities that we really focused on were El Paso, which had just recently passed a Complete Streets policy, Phoenix, who was integrating Complete Streets into their street projects, and Dallas, who has a Complete Streets design guide. So we're trying to see what those different cities that are kind of at similar size and demographics as San Antonio, to see how we could relate and where we were meeting them. And then we also looked at national practices, right? We looked at Smart Growth America and their framework, and we looked at City Health and their metal requirements to kind of get an idea of what the expectation is currently. And we did find, obviously, that the city needed to update our policy, right? So we were looking at including performance measures, coordinating internally and externally, and having that as a part of the requirement of the policy, requiring design updates, including project selection criteria, and prioritizing equity. So that's kind of where we started. Next slide. And so we really did lean heavily on Smart Growth America's framework to start developing that draft policy. And we also looked at our peer cities and their policies to kind of make that first draft. And that's when we created the stakeholder group. We had a stakeholder group that represented over 15 city departments. So that would include Public Works, our development services, as well as innovation, sustainability, DIA, right? We're trying to get a broad net, right, of perspectives and experience. And then also included over 15 non-city partners, right? So that would include our transit authority, our river authority, our MPO, as well as Smart Growth America and City Health also attended these meetings. So we really tried to have a broad net of engagement with our stakeholders so that when they were reviewing the document, they're able to give us a lot of really good feedback. And so what we found really was that stormwater and green infrastructure, heat mitigation, and public transits was a focus that we needed to bring into the policy. These are major issues for San Antonio, so almost all our policies and plans try to integrate them as well. And then we also found that accessibility versus access was kind of getting confused in the language of our policy. So we wanted to make sure that we were hitting both of those needs, right? Equitable access to our network and our multimodal network, as well as making sure it's accessible, right? ADA access and everything like that. And then we also saw that we needed to be more inclusive with the language that we were integrating into the document, cyclist versus bicyclist, along those lines. And then really, we dug in a lot on feasibility. So that was where the different department stakeholders were a really integral part of making sure that how we discussed it and what we were trying to accomplish was something that they could assist us with, right? And then exceptions as well. It was a new process. And so we were also really focused on making that a smooth transition from policy to practice. And that's kind of, I think that's my last slide. Next slide. Yeah. So that's really where we focused on the draft, and then we went and got that policy updated. And now we're kind of working on implementation. But I'm going to pass it back to Dustin for now. Thank you guys.
All right, thank you both to Zan and Ann. I will say, as I said, we promote policies. We really encourage everybody to adopt policies. We also do is evaluate policies. So we evaluate policies that people send to us or we're asked to review. And we have a sort of quantitative and qualitative approach to evaluating policies. And I'll say both San Antonio and St. Louis significantly improved their, with these new policies. There's significant improvements. I could give you the specific scores and things, but I won't go into so much detail. But both of these policies are going to be recognized in our Best Complete Streets Policies report that releases tomorrow. If you've attended this webinar, you will get an email that will share the information about that report. But I just want to say, yes, congratulations to San Antonio and St. Louis for their hard work. So I would like now to ask a couple of questions and hear both of you guys' response about this policy journey that you had. So first, you both mentioned the different people that were involved that you needed to bring along. How would you say, what was your approach to building out the coalition or the group that was needed to bring this policy across the finish line? And any good practices or advice you have for anybody who's in a similar situation? Either of you can jump in.
I can start. I'd say I got really lucky because there were so many people who reached out to me and wanted to work on this policy. The American Cancer Society, for example, I know Dustin, you'd reached out. A lot of different people had said that this is something that could be improved. And then once we started talking about it, the stakeholders in the area really identified themselves between the different, Transform 314 is a really active group, especially around organizing Black St. Louisans in transportation and mobility, as well as TrailNet, which does a lot of work with helping people, who are pedestrians or bike users or transit users to get around. So they self-identified and mobilized and were very helpful about getting this across the finish line.
Yeah, here in San Antonio, the San Antonio Complete Streets Coalition, which was started and managed externally from the city, was super helpful. It's what started the review process and the draft process. And they were really helpful with community meetings as well. And so they were a great partner throughout the process, checked in regularly, attended their meetings. And then for our stakeholder group, we really wanted to just have as broad a net as possible to have as many experiences and expertise involved to make sure that we weren't gonna set us up for failure, right? And I think maybe the one thing that was really helpful is that if a stakeholder suggested that someone else be included in the process, we would go ahead and bring them in, which was, I think, a very helpful part of the process.
Okay, great. Thank you. So far we've been talking about all the awesome work that you've done, the things that went well, how amazing it was. Tell us about the obstacles you encountered along the way. What were some of the challenges to getting these policies created? And how did you deal with them?
Yeah, so I think one of our things that we knew from the start was this was going to be an external push. Like we would draft it in-house and we would manage the engagement. And just a little background, the San Antonio Transportation Department has about 15 staff. So we knew it would be a a real lift for us. And so I think what we wanted to do to make sure that we got good engagement was really lean on a very diverse stakeholder group. We knew we wouldn't be able to go out to the community multiple times, and that we would lean on our partners to do that as well. And so we really wanted to make sure that our stakeholder group was very strong and that they were representing different communities in San Antonio so that they could bring that perspective to the table for them.
I think for me in St. Louis, we had the first draft that we worked on to update the 2015 policy was really the model policy that Smart Growth America had, with some changes to make it work a little bit more for St. Louis. That was the draft we introduced. When we did that, I'm a elected official. I don't work inside the various departments that actually enact these policies. They had a lot of questions and concerns about how they were going to do certain things, how they were going to track certain things, who was going to find the information, how they were going to manage the Complete Streets Committee, who was going to be on it, who was a voting member and who wasn't a voting member. So it's all of those questions really bubbled to the surface, and we tried to answer them in subsequent drafts and go back and forth and compromise really about from what was an ideal plan to what would work for the people who were enacting it. Of course, as soon as you do that, the different stakeholders in the community start pointing out the things that they didn't want to see change. And then you've got the other side saying, no, bring it back. So we were kind of in the middle being pulled different directions to try to find what would work for everyone. And I think that's reflected in why we got a bronze policy instead of a gold policy, because we had to take a step from 2015 to 2024. And that was a really big step for a lot of people within the departments. I can completely empathize with what Zan said about the different staff that have to make this happen. We, like every city probably across the country, are short staffed, and they're working really hard to implement what we can do now. As I mentioned earlier, it's a really fragmented government. We have a board of public service that actually executes the contracts and works with the design team to do our streets. And then we have a streets department that doesn't design streets, that manages the maintenance, and the different organizations are sort of not always in sync. So we've subsequently passed a Department of Transportation. It went to the voters to basically restructure our government. And we think that when that goes into effect, that will help us, further enact this policy. But, from the just smallest things in the policy to the biggest parts of it, there were a lot of questions and people who wanted us to go different directions. So it was a lot of compromises.
Okay. Yes, and we were watching the St. Louis discussions and compromises in real time, and I think there was a really important discussion that the alderwoman had to make, which was, well, do we want to pass, or do we want to try? Do we want to stick with the policy that we think is perfect, but will never get implemented, or do we want to find a solution that is maybe not perfect, but will actually have a chance of getting passed and getting implemented? And I think you all you took the right approach, in our opinion. Tell us about, this could be for either of you. Did you have people who were skeptical or opposed to the idea of complete streets or the need for a complete streets policy? And how do you deal with those conversations? How do you convince people who may not be fully on board?
I can start this one. I think in my community, we certainly have a number of people who are in the, I don't ever see people biking on our streets, so why do I need more bike lanes? It's like, oh God, that moment of having to explain that's because it's not safe right now, and if it were safer. But one of the things we really struggle with in St. Louis that we've been dealing with since the 1950s is population loss. The cities in the Midwest that are growing are cities that are investing in better transportation options. They're thinking about their pedestrians. They're thinking about their public transit. They're thinking about cycling. They're thinking about how those things attract business to their different corridors. And when I talk about those things and bring up the data that shows that this isn't just about, it's not a feel good, it is a feel good policy. I feel good about it, but it is something that is about, one, real access and accessibility. I like how you said that, Zan. And then also the economic improvements that can come when you actually prioritize people being able to live in a city. I always tell people, St. Louis is a city, it's not a suburb. When we try to make it a suburb, we lose people. And so that is what we need to focus on. We need to lean into our cultural institutions, to our kind of density, to our interesting homes. We have so much brick here. Those are the things that if we focus on, we're going to grow again. And if we don't focus on them, we keep building for a car, people will find more and more reasons to leave. So I think it's really looking at the things, the way that all these things are tied together.
Yeah, and I feel like one of the ways we kind of combat that is communication, right? A lot of our internal stakeholders, right, our city departments had a lot of questions and a lot of concerns, and we had to dig through a lot of sentences, right? We went line by line through this document, and we made sure that who would be responsible was very clear and how they could manage that, right? And so a lot of how does this fit into what we're currently doing, making it clear that we're not trying to invent the wheel, to kind of communicate that, but also our San Antonio Complete Streets Coalition spent a lot of time talking to council members, talking to community members, and kind of highlighting that community support for this update, which I think was a really important part. And we already had a lot of momentum here as well. We were almost 2 years into our bike network plan update. So we've been doing engagement around different modes of transportation. We were updating our visitor action plan. So there's already a lot of support for safety and network connectivity. And so just really pushing that and highlighting how we can work together interdepartmentally, and then also showing that outside support for the update.
Okay, fantastic. So now that the policies have been passed, we're, like a year on. Can you give us an update about how things are going? Have you started to see changes? A couple of them were mentioned in your presentation, such as like regular reporting and meetings. But how's it going, and what's next?
Yeah, I can start with that one. Um, some of our policy had some first step requirements, happen in the first year. And so we really try to tackle those first. So I'm very excited to say we are currently developing a design guide for the Complete Streets policy. It'll be something that we can integrate then into our internal like public works and our street design, and then ideally our unified development code, ideally for private developers to use as well. So we're very excited about that. We're also partnering with our sustainability department on creating a prioritization tool for our bond. So we're kind of hitting that goal as well. And we've also passed through council, but it's not finished getting set up, is our transportation commission, which will act as that oversight and a key part of that exception process. So we're very excited about that. And then also, again, Smart Growth America, we're doing a workshop with you guys in the fall, and that will kind of go towards our goal of education and continued education. So we're trying to hit a couple things right now. I'm very excited about the work we're doing.
I think that most of the work for us is about taking the policy on the ground and making sure it's what is funded on the street. And that is where we've seen some progress with the recommendations from the Complete Streets Committee to the Capital Committee. And soon we'll see the finished high injury network and transportation and mobility plan, which will even further guide the work. So I feel like that's what I'm looking to see right now, is the on paper translating into actual funding and projects. And that's where I'm seeing it going now.
Awesome. So before we move to audience Q&A, I would ask you both to give us one brilliant piece of advice for anybody who's thinking about creating a new policy or updating a policy. What's your word of wisdom?
I would say that there's so much available online already in terms of great policy recommendations, and you can make it work for your city. So start with what's already there and compare it. Smart Growth America did a great comparison of our policy to their model policy years ago, and that helped us to gather it as well. So you're really not starting from zero, even if your city doesn't have a complete streets policy. There's a lot of resources out there.
Yeah, and I've said this so many times, so I'm sorry that I'm being so repetitive, but really the stakeholder group was a huge part of making this policy successful and getting people interested in following through with it. And so just having that broad feedback from experts, both in the community as well as within the city, was very valuable, and I would recommend something similar if someone was working on updating it.
I would recommend it as well. That's the most impressive, yeah, working group that I've seen working on a policy. It was really impressive, the team that you guys put together in San Antonio. Fantastic. All right. Well, thank you all for answering my questions. Now we're going to pass it over and ask the audience, any participants here who have a question for Zan or Anne or myself, preferably for them though, because they're the people doing the work on the ground. You can throw it in the Q&A feature on Zoom. And we have one question that we can start with while other people think about the questions. So someone asked, is there guidance for complete streets policy for different road speeds? It seems a street of 25 miles per hour works very differently than one at 45 miles per hour.
Yeah, I can kind of touch on this. A really important part of our policy that I didn't really mention was flexibility. And so part of that is how much street do you have, right? What's your width? But some of it's who's the speed, who's using it the most frequently, what kind of land use is around it. And so a big part of our policy and what's going into our design guide is recognizing different uses and how to safely integrate the most modes of travel and recognize the needs of the most types of users in a safe way. And so really that flexibility means that, bike infrastructure might be off-road compared to on-road based of speed, and how much buffers between sidewalks and roadways are also something similar that we try to address when we consider speed as a factor.
It's a great question, and this is one that we are really just starting to address in St. Louis. In my ward, there have been a few streets that, as Dan mentioned, based on a design guide, based on policies we've had in place, are recommended for certain speeds that were higher. So we've been going through the ward and petitioning the streets department to change the speeds to what's recommended. A lot of those things are just not lining up, even from what we have again on paper. What's on the road is different. So that's been my first step with speed control in my neck of the woods in St. Louis. But it's a conversation we're having citywide right now. Our transportation mobility plan did a statistically relevant survey of people to basically ask, if you had to slow down but it was safer, would you support that? And overwhelming majority said that they would, which is really great because oftentimes when you take a proposal like that to people, to the community groups, and say we're going to slow down this road, we're going to change the speed limit, people might not be for it in that moment. But we do have a statistically relevant piece of data now that says the majority of St. Louisans support this. So that actually is really helpful for us in actually making these decisions, is knowing that even if in the minute situations, people who show up to a community meeting might not be supportive, the larger, broader sense of the public is that they are supportive of that sort of policy.
I think those are great answers. And yes, overwhelmingly, we know that speed is really the secret to safety. There's many studies out there that show the impact, and there's really no way to have high speeds and safe roads. They're just mutually incompatible. So I think it's great that you guys are taking that in consideration. Someone asks about about SGA's model policy. We don't have a single policy that we say, oh, here's what you should do. What we provide are some resources, one of which I'm going to put in the chat, which is the action guide, which SGA created along with City Health. So this action guide is a step-by-step basically the 11 things you need to do to create a really strong policy. And it uses very clear language and walks you through step one, step two, all the way through. And it also provides language from other cities, real cities that have passed complete streets policies that we think are pretty good. So for each section, you'll have like an excerpt from St. Louis or from San Antonio or from El Paso, somebody who's passed a strong policy. So if you're looking to create a policy from scratch or improve on your current existing one, the action guide on the City Health website is really a great place to start. Let's see, do we have other questions? Statistics to show how that not everyone is a car owner. Do you feel like this was helpful to the public? Do you guys use statistics about car ownership in your
We haven't as much as we should, I think, but I do think that it's helpful to the public. I know that when we were working on our complete streets policy in the city of St. Louis, my husband and I were sharing one car and we're doing that sort of one car household thing, and that really helped me to understand more of what we're trying to do here. I had always had a car. St. Louis was definitely not built for cars. We had trolleys that we destroyed, removed, took out. Terrible decision back in the day, but then was redesigned for the car. So it was always something that I thought I needed. But when I switched to taking the bus a lot more, which I still do, it gave me a lot of new perspective. So I do think that statistic is helpful, but I don't know if there's anything that's more helpful than actually encouraging people to have that as a lived experience.
To kind of build off of that, I don't have the statistics on me, but a good portion of San Antonians don't have access to a personal vehicle, and they have to use transit, walk, or bike to get to their work, to go to the grocery store. And so it's really important for us to always kind of steep our work in that and really emphasize that we're not just designing or recommending policy for people who want to interact and do active transportation for enjoyment, which is very valid in every way, but for the San Antonians who don't have a choice in a very hot city, in a very large city that takes a while to get across. So I don't have it on me, but we do try to use those. And definitely during our conversations with council members and other departments, and sometimes with the public as well.
Yeah, and at SGA, we definitely recommend getting out. The number is useful, but also putting faces to these things. A lot of times when people think about who uses a bike lane or who uses sidewalks, they have a certain very specific person in mind, and maybe it's not the most compelling, right? But if you can do a little research, get out, walk around, talk to people, and show that it's not just some business guy in spandex riding his bicycle, but it's the family, it's a person with a disability, it's a senior, to show the diversity of people that benefit from complete streets. That can really help strengthen your argument, because it's less easy to dismiss when you can really show, hey, look at all these different people that are going to benefit from this. Let's see. Do you have any advice on how to deal with irrelevant or counterproductive COVID data? How do you not include all the lower traffic usage speed? That's a pretty specific question. How do you get around the COVID confusion, the statistics that were sort of thrown off by COVID? Have you guys dealt with that in your work?
I can say that not necessarily the statistics, but one of the things that's really affected St. Louis is the reckless driving that has increased dramatically due to COVID. And that is something that has happened across the country, at least as far as I know. And I'd love to hear from people from other cities, but it's something that we're experiencing in St. Louis. The police stopped enforcing traffic laws for a time. And that was part between the psychological effects of COVID and I'm sure so many other things. it has increased reckless driving. And so that's something that we're having to think about a lot more when building out our complete streets, when we're building out protected bike lanes, and we're thinking about how to make it safe for people to use alternate forms of transportation. So that's how COVID has affected us in St. Louis, regarding our transportation planning more than anything else, certainly more than any statistic that came from it.
Great. Zan, there's a specific question for you. I think people are really interested to hear more about this stakeholder group, as they should be. How was it assembled? How long did they inform your team? Did you pay them? And were there members of that group that come from traditionally excluded groups or who might otherwise have been overlooked?
Yeah, so for the stakeholder group, we did lean on the coalition some for those outside partners to get them involved. We had some Activate SA and American Heart Association were big partners in leading that coalition, and so we would ask them for assistance sometimes with getting interaction to kind of start that. For internal departments, a lot of them are interested. Sometimes, it's a director to director conversation, which was very helpful. I think having the support of our department and our city management was a really big part of getting that engagement. And it was extremely helpful. And I think a lot of those departments either wanted their perspective shared or knew that they would need to follow through with the policy. So they were interested in participating. Um, the question's gone away. So I've lost some of the questions inside of the question.
Did you actually pay them? Was there any honorarium or anything? And then also, were there groups that may be traditionally, excluded from these kinds of conversations? How did you approach them?
Sure. So we did not pay our stakeholder group. They were volunteers, which we really appreciated. We tried to make sure we were hitting different community types. So AARP was a big team member for us. We also were in the middle of the bike network plan, so we were already making connections to different active like MPOs that were focused on pedestrian and bicycle safety, and so we were able to integrate some of their feedback and participation that way. We did our best to include focuses in older adults in communities that are disadvantaged here in San Antonio, as well as environmental concerns and our transit authority. So we did try to get a broad group both internally who work on those topics in the city, and then also outside partners to do it as well.
Okay, fantastic. Well, thank you guys for fielding those questions. I think you all did a great job with that. I hope that the audience found those answers useful, satisfactory for the ones who asked them, and also informative for those who didn't ask. So with that, we are going to wrap up. A couple of things to take away. As we at Smart Growth America always say, people-centered design. We're really designing streets for people, not for cars. It's really important to have that as like our, the starting point. In terms of policies should be as strong as possible. Anne mentioned earlier that St. Louis's old policy could best be described as vibes of complete streets. That's not good enough. It's really important to have strong, clear, binding language that is going to hold everybody who's involved accountable. Otherwise, things won't change, things won't get done. And then engagement and accountability, center community voices, equity focused outcomes. I think, some of the examples that both Zan and Ann gave of how they approached their, this was not just Ann and Zan with a pen and paper writing a policy, right? It really was a whole village approach to drafting these policies in the first place, but also getting them into, the government departments who are going to be ultimately responsible for enacting them, and really making sure that community voices are involved in those as well. So with that, I will direct you to some of the resources that we've shared today. It can be found at cityhealth.org. In particular, I recommend the action guide. You see a screenshot of it here. But you can also find all the information about the City Health Complete Streets Framework, and you can see where your city is ranking, where other cities that you're interested in rank, and any other information. You can certainly reach out to me, to myself, or Zan or Ann, I'm sure, for follow-up questions. And with that, I think we can close it here. Thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate your time and attention. This has been a fantastic discussion, and we look forward to working with you in the future. Good luck.